The story Elinalise tells Rudius is not clean, and it is not easy. It begins with a girl rescued from a labyrinth and becomes the curse she has carried for 200 years. AI Anime and Manga presents Eliso. If you enjoy these light novel continuations, please like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe. YouTube members also get early access to upcoming episodes, and that support helps cover the AI narration, subtitles, thumbnails, and rendering that keep the project moving. Now, in Chaos Breaker, Rudius listens without turning away. 200 years ago, a girl was rescued from a labyrinth. She had lost all her memories and emotions. She had no idea who she was, only that she looked like an elf, so she was placed in an elven settlement and resumed a normal life there. The people in the village welcomed her, even though she was a stranger. Her memories never returned, but after a few years, her emotions did. She became cheerful and sociable, and before long she fell in love with one of the men in the village. Only after the two became intimate did a problem begin. Her libido suddenly spiked. She wanted sex every night. Elves were not inclined toward intimacy as often as humans or goblins, and her partner struggled to keep up with her needs. Even so, the two lived in harmony. Around that time, something strange happened to her body. After they began having sex, she started producing a small, round, magical crystal every month. Inside each one was an incredibly dense accumulation of mana. When she told her husband, he was unnerved by the abnormal phenomenon, but he assured her it was nothing to worry about. Before long, her husband began selling the crystals in a human town. It might have looked as if greed had clouded his eyes, but one could hardly blame him for coveting the money those crystals earned. He had never been rich, and his wife did not work. At least he never treated her like a personal money tree. Tragedy struck 5 years later. Her husband died. More accurately, he was murdered. His cargo of extremely expensive crystals drew the attention of bandits, and they attacked him, taking both his life and his wealth. With him gone, the woman became a widow. She fell deep into depression, but she endured. Unfortunately, the problem with her body grew worse. 10 days after her husband passed, the urge came on strong and swift from deep inside her. She could not suppress it. She forced herself on one of the men in the village. She knew it was wrong, but she did it anyway. The man did not refuse her, and nothing happened after that single encounter. 10 more days passed, and she went after a different man. Then another 10 days, and it happened again. Her appetite was so untamable that word soon spread of her wild promiscuity. The women of the village denounced her and drove her out. That woman became a prostitute after that, then a slave, and finally an adventurer. It is said that even to this day she continues wandering the world. Elinalise finished her story first thing that morning and said, "And that is basically what my life has been like."
You didn't have to tell me everything.
Honestly, hearing all of it left me stunned. The curse was the only thing I needed to know about, but Elinalise had not spared a single detail. Elinalise said, "This is my way of making up for not telling you any of this sooner." I asked,
So, does Cliff already know all of this?
Elinalise answered, "Of course. I told him before our wedding."
Oh, okay. What about Sylphie?
Elinalise said, "She does not know. I doubt she wants to know her grandmother once sold her body for money." I shrugged.
I don't think Sylphie would care about that kind of thing.
Elinalise said, "I just hope you will not look at her in a different light if you hear ill rumors about me somewhere. She may have my blood running through her, but she is just a normal girl."
I know. I would never do that to her.
Besides, Sylphie was not responsible for anything Elinalise may have done in the past. After hearing everything Elinalise had been through, I could understand why she kept quiet about her history and her relation to Sylphie. No one wants people to look at them differently. Anyway, the past is the past. There were things in my past I did not want to reveal either. I could not pretend the things I had done in my previous life did not exist, but that story would stay in my head and my head alone. I asked her,
So what is your curse exactly?
Elinalise said, "The mana in my body builds and coalesces into a magical crystal upon receiving a man's seed. If I do not receive a man's seed, the mana will continue building until it kills me."
But you were fine the first couple of years, right?
Elinalise said, "I honestly do not entirely understand that either. At the time, I was not having a monthly cycle, so maybe that had something to do with it."
Your monthly
I repeated her words before trailing off. If it had something to do with her menstrual cycle, then maybe it was her ova that were transforming into those magical crystals. In that case, Zenith's curse was probably something different altogether. I assumed she still had those monthly visits. After all, she had already given birth to 2 children, and although Lilia had not given me any details, she was still only about 35 years old. I asked,
But your memories never came back?
Elinalise shook her head. No. Even now I do not remember anything. I went silent, so she still did not remember her past, which meant she had no idea who she was exactly. There was a slim possibility that she might suddenly remember someday, but if she had not remembered in 200 years, it seemed unlikely she ever would. Elinalise said, Zenith's condition is different from mine. Judging by how she acts, it seems she knows who her children are. Perhaps she may regain all of her memories.
I hope you're right.
Maybe it was better not to do too much wishful thinking, though. I asked.
What about her curse?
Elinalise answered. At the moment, she is not showing any signs of having one like mine.
I didn't think so.
Elinalise added, she most likely has a different curse on her.
Really?
She nodded. I think there is a distinct possibility. Do you have any idea what her curse could be? An idea, huh? Maybe a vague one, but nothing conclusive. After a short pause, I admitted.
Nope. Nothing.
Elinalise said, all right, well, best to continue keeping an eye on her. Whatever Zenith's curse was, it was not something lethal yet, but there could be a trigger out there that would cause it to manifest.
I guess that's all we can do right now, huh? Keep watching her?
Elinalise said yes. I was not going to get my hopes up, but I still could not help praying that nothing bad happened. Elinalise lowered her head and said, that is the extent of what I know. I am sorry. There was too much I did not want to say, and I was late giving you the truth. I understood not wanting to share about her past. In fact, I felt guilty for not sharing the events of my previous life with Sylphie and Roxy. It did suck that Elinalise had not told me sooner, but I was not about to be a hypocrite and get mad at her for it.
No, I appreciate you talking about it even though you didn't feel comfortable. Thank you.
I extended my hand and she shook it, gripping it tight. Elinalise said, well then, I am going to return to Cliff.
I'm going to rest a little more, then go check on Nanahoshi.
Elinalise said, all right, have a nice day. Then Elinalise turned and slipped out of the room. In the end, I did not learn anything new about Zenith's condition. There was a high probability she had a curse on her, but it had not caused any problems yet. All I could do was prepare myself to act in case anything did happen later on. After breakfast, we gathered in a room with a long table and took our seats. Nanahoshi and Cliff sat to one side of me with Zenoba on the other. Directly across from me was Silveril of the Void, the woman with black wings who served Perugius. Silveril said, all right, now let us begin our lesson. The agreement was for Perugius to teach Nanahoshi summoning magic, but Nanahoshi had been kind enough to ask that we be included. We were starting from the very basics, so Perugius was not the one teaching us. He would turn up when it was time to put what we had learned to the test. He was probably having tea with Ariel at that moment. I should probably be focusing on the lesson instead of worrying about where Perugius was, Silveril said. First, let us make sure we are all on the same page. What is summoning magic? You there. Cliff supplied his name. Cliff Grimmer, Silveril said. Cliff, please answer for me. What is summoning magic? There were 2 types of summoning magic as I understood it. The first was bestowal, which was mostly used to create magical implements. In other words, it was the drawing of summoning circles. Cliff specialized in this, and it was a flourishing art in the magic city of Sharia. The second type was invocation, which allowed you to summon anything in existence, from simple animals such as dogs and cats to highly intelligent beasts. That list included gentle monsters easy for humans to tame, as well as creatures with low intellect like goblins and treants. You could also summon spirits that existed somewhere out in the world. There were no professors in Sharia who could perform invocation magic. Even the guild only had a few people who could do it, and they were all amateurs. Perhaps some other country was monopolizing that school of magic, or maybe no one around Sharia could teach it. Either way, that was the extent of my knowledge. Cliff must have been about as versed as me because he gave the same answer. Silverl shook her head and said, "That is incorrect. It is true that summoning requires a magic circle by nature, but the drawing of a circle is not in itself part of this school of magic," I asked.
Which means only the latter qualifies as summoning magic, then.
The atmosphere reminded me of when Roxy used to give me lessons as a child. Silverl answered, "Yes, but Cliff was not wrong when he said there were two types of summoning magic."
In other words, bestowal isn't one of those types.
Silverl said, "Indeed." She spoke in a gentle voice, but since there was no blackboard or textbook, I had to take notes using the stack of papers and quill pen I had brought. It made this feel like a real class. Silverl continued, "There are two types of summoning magic, fiend summoning and spirit summoning." I wrote down both names. From what I remembered, spirits were beings that existed in our world but rarely showed themselves. The only kinds I had ever seen before were the lamplight spirits I had summoned with those scrolls. I asked,
What's the difference between those two?
Silverl said, "Fiend summoning, as you humans well know, allows you to call upon a beast living somewhere out in the wild. Per an ancient covenant, anything considered to be a person cannot be summoned. However, everything else that exists in the world can be, so all kinds of creatures could be invoked with such magic, even dragons."
What's this ancient covenant?
Silverl answered, "When summoning magic was first born into this world, our ancestors made a covenant. Magic cannot break those ancient rules, so people could not be summoned." Was that really true? What was so different between teleporting a person and summoning them? Not that it really mattered. The important thing was getting the basics down pat. I could ask more nuanced questions later.
Sorry. Please continue.
Silverl said, "Very well. In fiend summoning, one cannot invoke a creature with more mana than they possess themselves. Even if they do so, there is a high likelihood they will not be able to control the creature they summon. Come to think of it, I had read about that in a book a long time ago. Sig's Summoning Magic, I think it was called. It contained the tale of someone who invoked a creature stronger than they were, which ate them alive. Considering how vast my own mana pool was, I probably would not have issues no matter what I summoned, but I had no idea if it would obey me or not. Not that I had plans to summon anything powerful. Besides, we had 3 pets in the house already. There was no need for me to summon anything. The question slipped out before I could stop it.
Oh yeah. Are living creatures the only thing you can summon?
Silverl said, "Yes. You cannot summon the dead."
No, I meant things. Like, could I summon some clothes that are at my house right now?
Silverl answered, "I am afraid that is impossible, so I could not summon Roxy's panties." Wait, hold on a second. Nanahoshi had succeeded in summoning a plastic bottle. Surely it was not impossible. Maybe it was better to say that no one in this world had figured out how to do it yet. That would explain why Perugius was so interested in Nanahoshi's research. It meant such magic was possible. Now I understood why he had agreed to aid her. Silverl interrupted my thoughts. May I continue?
Oh yes. My apologies for interjecting repeatedly.
Silverl said, "Not at all. Your queries indicate how passionate you are about learning." She nodded slowly before continuing. Spirit summoning, as the name implies, involves the creation of a spirit.
Creation? As in you're actually making them?
Silverl answered, "Correct. You expend mana in the process and create a spirit with certain abilities, such as how spirit summoning operates. In other words, by using those scrolls Nanahoshi had provided, I was not summoning lamplight spirits from elsewhere. I was conjuring them with my own mana." Silverl explained, "Spirits possess a low level of intellect and will obey the summoner's orders until they use up all of their mana."
Is that an absolute?
After a pause, Silverl answered, "No. If you specifically construct the circle so that they will not follow your orders, then a spirit with free will shall be created instead. But if you did not do that, would they follow your every command? That was almost like programming." Wait. Speaking of programming, I felt like I had heard about a similar concept. Cliff said, voice filled with dissatisfaction. That seems odd to me. Those of you who serve Perugius were spirits summoned 400 years ago, yes? You are awfully intelligent if that is the case, and it is odd that you have not disappeared in the intervening centuries. Just what I would expect from you, Cliff. He was too sharp to let that inconsistency slip by. Silverl nodded cheerfully. I am glad you brought that up. Lord Perugius' predecessor, the first armored dragon king, passed on his knowledge of how to create 11 ancient, highly intelligent, and powerful spirits. Ordinarily, spirits of such caliber would not last more than a single day, but Lord Perugius has developed a way to maintain them for centuries. She sure was being boastful, but I could see why. It was quite a feat to maintain for eternity what would normally only last a day. In other words, perpetual motion. A concept just as incredible in my previous world as it was in this one. Wait a second, she said 11 ancient spirits. Was that one too few, I asked.
Don't you mean 12?
Silveril answered, no, 11. I am not one of Lord Perugius' spirits.
You're not? You're not.
Silveril said, not at all. Lord Perugius saved me during Laplace's war, and I have served him ever since. I am simply one of the sky folk. Sky folk. Well, that would explain the wings. If the others were his servants, perhaps she was more of a confidant, or a lover. No, that could not be. Romance was not the only bond that existed in the world. I asked.
So which will we be learning?
Silveril answered, we will primarily focus on fiend summoning. However, Lord Perugius considers the summoning of things from another world to resemble spirit summoning, so I am sure we will touch on that as well. So we were going to learn both. I was looking forward to that. It might be fun to summon monsters from all over the world and open a zoo. Zenoba said, I would like to learn more about spirit summoning specifically, if possible. Cliff nodded in agreement and said, I am interested in the subject too. As I noticed how invested they both were, something in my brain finally clicked. Programming. That was right. The way the core of that automated doll functioned had reminded me of programming. Wait. If we were able to learn spirit summoning, we might be able to complete that doll. Of course, I did not think it would be easy to succeed where Maniacal Dragon King Chaos had failed, but I was sure this magic would come in handy all the same. You never knew when such knowledge would be useful, Silveril said. All right, now let us start by learning the foundations of summoning. First, please look at this magic circle. And so Silveril began the lesson. Unfortunately, I was behind the other three when it came to knowing how to draw a magic circle. I was almost like a dropout who had suddenly decided to rejoin his peers. Maybe I should have learned the basics instead of leaving it to everyone else. It was not too late to start now, regardless. One was never too old to learn something new, and I was only 18. Look at Zenoba. He was in his mid-20s when he first entered the academy, and he had come a long way refining his ability to craft dolls. I should learn from his example, although I was starting off on bad footing right now. After this lesson was over, I needed to put in some revision and practice. Silveril said, by the by, it is almost time for lunch. If there is anything specific you would like to eat, please let me know. And with that, our lesson ended. The night before, we had ancient Asuran cuisine for dinner, which included meatballs and potatoes boiled with herb soup. There was bread made from wheat and other grains, among other dishes. It was not too different from what we ate in Sharia. Considering how grand the fortress looked from the outside, it was quite a simple meal, albeit delicious. But from Perugius' standpoint, it was not ancient cuisine at all. He considered this traditional Asuran cooking the standard food people had made 400 years ago. There was a saying I had read somewhere, technology advances during times of war, while cuisine advances during times of peace. Asura's dishes had changed greatly over the past 400 years. Dinner was brought to each of our rooms, but I ate mine with Sylphie. No matter how luxurious the rooms were, dining by yourself was far too lonely. It was strange how I had never felt that way in my previous life. I had really changed since then. Breakfast, on the other hand, I had to eat alone. Such is life. Now it was time for lunch, and Silveril had volunteered to make us whatever we liked. Considering Arumanfi was aboard and could do errands at the speed of light, they could fetch ingredients from any country in the world. Actually, they could simply order from any restaurant and have him bring the food back. His speed sure came in handy for home delivery. Cliff asked, could I have something from Millis? Zenoba said, then I would like something from Chiron. They both wanted cooking from their respective home countries. No matter how comfortable they acted here, they missed home for sure. Silveril responded gently to their requests. Very well. I shall have it prepared for you, Nanahoshi said. I am fine with whatever, Perhaps she had not realized it, but this was our chance. I was not the type of man to let a good opportunity slip by. As the charismatic Char Aznable often said, make optimal use of every chance you get.
I'm thinking vinegar-seasoned white rice with fresh raw fish that's been cut into bite-sized pieces on top. Do you know of such a dish?
Nanahoshi's face lit up. What? Is there such a thing here? Unfortunately, Silverl shook her head. No, I have never heard of such a thing. Although we do have rice here. Nanahoshi's shoulders slumped. I, however, was overjoyed to hear this. As long as we had rice, we could find something else to go with it.
How about cold water with raw egg and wheat flour, mixed into a fine batter that you can dip shrimp, squid, or vegetables in and fry in oil at a high temperature?
Silverl said, I have never heard of that either. Although we do have wheat flour and eggs. Ooh, so they had eggs, which meant I could always have raw egg cracked over steamy hot rice. Unsurprisingly, sushi and tempura were a no-go. That probably meant I was out of luck with sukiyaki as well, since it involved boiling soy sauce, sugar, and mirin in a pot. Whatever we got here would not be as delicious as what you could eat at a restaurant back in Japan, but at least with these ingredients we could make something. What we really needed was soy sauce. That was the real Japanese flavor we were hankering for.
How about a sauce made from fermented soybeans? Either soy sauce or soy paste would be fine.
Silverl said, we do not have anything like that here at our fortress. As I suspected, no such thing existed here. Silverl said, continued, I have heard, however, that Herald Kingdom uses a sauce similar to the one you described. We could order Aramanfi to go search for it. I perked up.
Yes, please.
I did not care that it was extra trouble for Aramanfi. If we could have him search for it, then we might as well. After an hour, Aramanfi came back without any soy sauce. It was no surprise given the short time frame, and it was my fault for only bringing it up when it was almost lunchtime. But while he may not have found soy sauce, he did bring us something else, a reddish-brown substance that the people of Herald made by fermenting beans. They called it tofu, but I decided to call it miso instead, because come on, this was totally miso. If memory served me correctly, Herald Kingdom was located in the northeastern part of the central continent. Miso and soy sauce were two sides of the same coin. Perhaps they had already invented soy sauce in that country. Someday I would need to head out that way to see for myself. I would have to find time to visit, even if it was 10 or 20 years down the road. That aside, we had rice and miso, so naturally I asked them to get us some white fish. Sadly, we did not have grated radish or ginger, but we did have lemons. Pickled vegetables would have been a nice addition, but there was no use fussing over something they did not have here. I did my best to give Silverl a decent recipe while keeping the available ingredients in mind. Silverl reappeared a while later with some piping hot white rice and asked, "Is this what you wanted?" Steam rose from the miso-flavored shellfish. Then there was nicely toasted white fish with lemon. There were 2 plates, one for me and one for Nanahoshi. Mine came with a raw egg.
Sometimes you gotta treat yourself to some comfort food like this.
After a long pause, Nanahoshi replied, "Yeah, I guess." Although the 2 dishes looked perfect, Nanahoshi gazed at them in dismay. Perhaps she disliked that they only resembled Japanese cuisine without actually replicating the flavor. Well, I could not blame her. It tasted nothing like I remembered, but it was still fun to give it a try, even if it was not authentic.
Put your hands together in thanks and let's dig in.
Nanahoshi said, "Yeah, let's." Nanahoshi kept frowning as she picked up her spoon and fork and began eating. Her expression twisted in disgust as she deboned the fish, squeezed some lemon, and took a small bite. Next, she took a hesitant bite of rice and chewed slowly. She also sipped from a white porcelain bowl filled with miso soup. Finally, Nanahoshi said, "This miso soup does not have any dashi in it." Big fat tears welled up in her eyes. She continued eating as they fell. It was pretty terrible. The rice was dry and tasteless, and the miso soup was incredibly salty. The fish was delicious enough, but it smelled awful and did not go with the lemon at all. The balance was terrible. It was not good at all. The Japanese cuisine from our memories had a much more delicate flavor. Despite all of that, Nanahoshi continued shoveling it down through her tears. She did not speak again until she finished, but that did not take long. Nanahoshi said, "Thank you for the food." Hearing that was enough to know I had made the right choice. Rudius could not give Nanahoshi the perfect taste of home. But rice, miso, fish, and the effort behind them were enough to reach something she had been holding back. Next, the afternoon lesson continues deeper into Chaos Breaker, where summoning theory starts pointing towards stranger questions. If you want the story to keep moving, like, comment, and subscribe. YouTube members get early access to upcoming episodes, and that support helps cover the narration, subtitles, thumbnails, and rendering behind the channel. Choose the next episode when it appears, or keep watching the story order playlist.